Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 7 2016 NFL predictions. Well, for the Fanatic, it continues to be rough sledding for both my against the spread and straight up picks. This week so far, I am 4-8-2 against the spread, and straight up I am 7-7. So overall for the year now, that makes me 36-51-3 against the spread and 51-41 straight up. The against the spread, I kind of expected, this is my first year doing against the spread picks, I kind of expected a bit of tough sledding, but I was kind of hoping by this point of the year I'd try to get up to, like 500 week. Or, well, I think I've had one 500 week, but I tried to get a better grasp and a better record at against the spread picking. So, I'm going to continue doing it. I'm going to continue to do it for the rest of this year, and I hope just by luck, or just, if I can just keep looking at games, that it will get better. And straight up, I would have to say that I'm kind of having an Aaron Rodgers type of year this year, with how Aaron Rodgers has been playing, that this is not one of my better straight up years. For a lot of the games, it's either been close, or it's just one of those aspects of there are certain teams that you're now believing in, there's certain teams that you're not believing in, and just every week, most teams, you don't know what team is going to show up, or you don't know what breaks are going to go your way or not, and that kind of affects how all the picks have been going. So, again, I expect for this year, I don't know, I definitely know this, probably by the rate I'm going, I'm not going to get up to that 62%, but if I can get up to 60% by the end of the year, which is still a possibility, that'd be an accomplishment for this type of season. And before I go into my picks, I wanted to shout out Team Avatar 112, Cody Ray Parker, excuse me if I botched your name there, for giving me this tag, and also I want to shout out Andrew Warren, who started this among all the NFL YouTube prognosticators, about asking certain questions and just having feedback from a few progs that he tags. Then I get to answer. Then I get to ask another question to a few other progs. So his question to me, or his question to the three guys he tagged, was: does winning the Super Bowl MVP guarantee you to essentially be a Hall of Famer? What I would say to Team Avatar 112 or Cody is this. I did some research. Out of the 50 Super Bowls played, 20 Hall of Famers are in. Yeah, there are 20 Hall of Famers that won Super Bowl MVP out of the 50 Super Bowls. There are 10 Hall of Famers on that list that should be on the list by the end. And the names are Terrell Davis, Kurt Warner, Tom Brady, Hines Ward, Ray Lewis, Von Miller, Eli and Peyton Manning, though you definitely can make an argument about Eli with all his inconsistencies. Besides 2 years he won a ring, Drew Brees, and Aaron Rodgers. So there are your 10 extra Hall of Famers, or soon-to-be Hall of Famers, should-be Hall of Famers, or future Hall of Famers that, will go into that Super Bowl MVP list. So I would say that winning the Super Bowl MVP helps your case, though for the most part, it really isn't that. It's not the end-all be-all, or it's not a 100% guarantee that you are going to get into the Hall of Fame with a Super Bowl MVP. Because for every Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, there's a Malcolm Smith and a Desmond Howard. And those two guys, even Desmond Howard is a phenomenal college player, not very good in the NFL, and Malcolm Smith now is kind of a depth linebacker for the Raiders. So I'll put it that way. So there's your answer there to that question, Cody. I do think that the Super Bowl MVP helps your chances, but it is not 100% guaranteed that you will make the Hall of Fame with the Super Bowl MVP. So now I would like to tag Billy B, Hatbox, and Bridgewater's Finest. And here is my question for those three guys. If you could name one offensive player and one defensive player that if you could, would love to play against, if you were an NFL player, what are those two players? So the one offensive player you'd love to go up against, and the one defensive player you'd love to go up against at any position out there. So that's my question for you three guys, if you want to continue this trend by Andrew Warren. So again, the offensive player you'd want to play the most if you were in the NFL, and a defensive player from any time in the league. What are those two players that you would want to play? Alright, so there you go, guys. Alright, so time for my picks. This week for buys, the 5-1 Dallas Cowboys and the 1-5 Carolina Panthers are the two teams that are on bye this week. So if you have Cam Newton, Kelvin Benjamin, Jonathan Stewart, Fozzie Whitaker, Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, the Dallas defense, Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams, Greg Olsen. If you have any of those guys, bench them because they won't be playing this week. And it's really surprising that the Cowboys are the 5-1 team and the Panthers are the 1-5 team. If you would have told me in the beginning of the year what team would be which, I would say Carolina's 5-1 and Dallas is 1-5. Alright, so time for my picks. So this Thursday, when the 1-5 Chicago Bears go to the 3-2 Green Bay Packers, the Green Bay Packers are 9-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take Chicago +9, but Green Bay straight up. And in the next game, when the 3-3 New York Giants go to the 3-3 LA Rams, the New York Giants are 2.5-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take the New York Giants -2.5, along with the Giants straight up. And in the next game, when the 2-3 New Orleans Saints go to the 3-2 Kansas City Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs are 6.5-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take New Orleans +6.5, but I'm going to take Kansas City straight up. And in the next game, when the 2-4 Indianapolis Colts go to the 3-3 Tennessee Titans, the Tennessee Titans are 2.5-point favorites in this game. I actually am going to take the Tennessee Titans -2.5, along with the Titans straight up. And in the next game, when the 5-0 Minnesota Vikings go to the 3-2 Philadelphia Eagles, the Minnesota Vikings are 2.5-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings -2.5, along with straight up. And in the next game, when the 0-6 Cleveland Browns go to the 2-4 Cincinnati Bengals, the Cincinnati Bengals are 10-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take Cleveland +10, but Cincinnati straight up. And in the next game, when the 4-2 Washington Redskins go to the 3-3 Detroit Lions, the Detroit Lions are 1-point favorites in this game. I'm actually going to take Washington +1, along with Washington straight up. And in the next game, when the 4-2 Oakland Raiders go to the 2-3 Jacksonville Jaguars, the Oakland Raiders are actually 1.5-point underdogs in this game. I'm a little surprised by that. But I'm going to take Oakland +1.5 and Oakland straight up. And in the next game, when the 4-2 Buffalo Bills go to the 2-4 Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills are 2.5-point favorites in this game against Miami. I'm going to take Buffalo -2.5, along with Buffalo straight up. And in the next game, when the 3-3 Baltimore Ravens go to the 2-4 or 1-5 New York Jets, this is actually a pick'em, which I'm not surprised with knowing how these two teams have played, and basically this is kind of the turning point for both their seasons. I'm going to take the Baltimore Ravens in this pick'em against the spread and straight up. And in the next game, when the 2-3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers go to the 1-5 San Francisco 49ers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 2-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take Tampa Bay -2, along with Tampa Bay straight up. And in the next game, when the 2-4 San Diego Chargers go to the 4-2 Atlanta Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons are 6.5-point favorites in this game. I actually am going to take San Diego +6.5, but Atlanta straight up. And then the next game, when the 5-1 New England Patriots go to the 4-2 Pittsburgh Steelers, the New England Patriots are 7.5-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take New England -7.5 and straight up. And then for the Sunday night game, when the 4-1 Seattle Seahawks go to the 2-4 or 3-3 Arizona Cardinals, the Seattle Seahawks are 1-point underdogs in this game. I am actually going to take Seattle +1 and Seattle straight up. And then for the Monday night game, when the 4-2 Houston Texans go to the 4-2 Denver Broncos, the Denver Broncos are 6.5-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take Houston +6.5, but Denver straight up. Alright, time for my thoughts on each game. The Chicago Bears at the Green Bay Packers. Wow, the Green Bay Packers have been struggling mightily this entire year, and yesterday was one of their worst overall games in a very long time for a lot of reasons, and here's a few of them right here. The Cowboys yesterday ran for 191 yards. That is 20 more yards than the Packers have given up in the last 4 games. They were the second best running defense in the league going into this game, and they only allowed 171 yards on the ground. The Cowboys carved them up for 191. So that's bad. Even though that's a huge credit to Dallas for their incredible offensive line, their running game. It's the first time the Packers had 4 turnovers at home since Week 4 of the 2010 season against Detroit. But unlike yesterday, they actually were still able to win that game, amazingly. And also, for the first time after about 195 pass attempts, Aaron Rodgers threw his first interception against the Cowboys in his career, and that was right to Barry Church. And that was a really bad throw by Aaron Rodgers because Barry Church was basically just sitting there waiting for Rodgers to throw the ball there. And also for the Packers, this was awkward. This was their first non-division loss for the Packers at home since Week 16 of the 2013 season when Pittsburgh went into Lambeau and beat the Matt Flynn-led Packers. And when I heard this on the Gamecast, I was surprised. The Packers, about midway through the fourth quarter, they scored their first offensive touchdown in the second half of any of their games this year. And since Week 10 of the 2015 season, everybody talks about Lambeau Field and how great it is. But they've gone now 3-4 in their last 7 games at Lambeau. From 2011 to 2014, they only had 4 losses in 4 years. They were 26-4-1. So this is definitely not the Green Bay team that anybody, that they're used to over the last several years. And Aaron Rodgers, essentially, for his career, this is the lowest totals in yards, completion percentage, touchdown, yards per game, yards per attempt in his career since his rookie year. And I think that is a tremendous concern. And the one thing I know about Aaron Rodgers is that he has one of the best arms, maybe in history. He has, unbelievable mental ability. But he has the personality of Jay Cutler. That when the Packers are down, which is not very often, but when they're down, you're never going to get any motivation from Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's a very horrible thing. And I don't think a lot of Packer fans or a lot of people that love Aaron Rodgers won't realize that. That he has, sensational arm and mental ability, but he has the personality of Jay Cutler. When the Packers are down, he's not going to inspire them to say that they're back in the game. And also, I just thought he was nonchalant in a loss that he should be more concerned about. I was like, I'm going to drink a bottle of scotch, or I'm going to drink a little bit of scotch and go over the tape. Everything's all right. I would tell Aaron, no, everything is not all right, because from the way you've looked at this year, this Packer team is nowhere near as good as we thought you would be, especially with all your weapons back that you have. But they're playing a Bears team that are kind of like this team they're kind of like a Raven team where they've been pretty competitive in most of their games, especially with Brian Hoyer being back there. Brian Hoyer, he's the first pair quarterback in Bears franchise history to believe to have 4 straight 300-yard passing games. Congrats to him on that. And also Cameron Meredith, he's been a very nice surprise over the last 2 games. He only had 54 yards receiving as a career high last year for his rookie year. And over the last 2 weeks, he's had 2 back-to-back 100-yard games. 130 and 113 yards yesterday. And honestly, for the Bears, I think Brian Hoyer's won the job in Chicago because Brian Hoyer's been playing consistently at a much higher rate than Jay Cutler has. I still think that Brian Hoyer, that is a problem that he's not winning games, and he's had opportunities to put up numbers. But then you can always win the defense, and again, the running game's been struggling. And the Bears have just had a really rough year. But with that being said, the Packers are playing the lowest scoring offense in the league. They've lost 4 of the last 6 games against the Packers. And I just think, again, the Bears are going to put up a fight, which I can't believe that the spread is -9 just because of how the Bears have been playing over the last several weeks. But I think Aaron Rodgers, it's a home game. He's angry about what happened last year on Brett Favre retirement night where, they lost to the Jay Cutler-led Bears 17-13 at Lambeau. I think they'll be motivated for that. And I just think the Packers just have a better, overall sense of talent, and the Bears' offensive line isn't Dallas's, and Jeremy Howard's not Ezekiel Elliott. And I think they'll be able to shut down the running game enough to where Brian Hoyer is going to struggle in more of a sense than he has the last few weeks. I think the game can be competitive because Brian Hoyer's playing really well, really has no pressure on him to win, and he's just been playing at a rate where, I could see him putting up another good game. But with the Packers' talent, what they have, especially off a short week, with them being the home team, I have enough confidence to say that they're going to beat the Bears in a awkward game. But that's what I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers to beat the Chicago Bears. The next game, the Giants at the Rams. This game is in London. This is the Giants' second trip across the pond. Well, this is the Rams' first trip against the pond as the LA team. I think it's odd that they put both the two biggest markets in the country over in London. You would think that you would want to play this in New York or LA, but I digress. That's just my thought. So, when you look at what happened yesterday with the Giants and the Ravens, I'm going to congratulate Eli Manning. He joined the 300 touchdown club, becoming the 8th QB to do so, so congrats to him. And what a great game for Odell Beckham Jr. Statistically, this was one of his breakout games. This was the game that you kind of expected he could have. He had the second highest amount of receiving yards in a single game in Giants franchise history. Only Del Schaffner in 1969 against the Washington Redskins had more receiving yards than Odell Beckham's 222 yards. Odell Beckham had 211 of his 222 yards in the second half. That's the second most receiving yards in a half in the last 30 seasons. With Odell Beckham, he also had his fourth receiving touchdown of 75 yards or more. That is the fourth in the last 3 seasons. That's more than anybody in the NFL. And also, I do want to congratulate the Giants in general for being the third franchise in NFL history to have 700 wins. Only the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers have more victories. And when you look at the Giants, that was just a win that they needed. Because both teams, the Giants and the Ravens, played like the Giants and Ravens had been. And it was just where the Ravens made one more mistake than what the Giants did. And we couldn't make one more play to get the game to win. Even though, again, there was coaching on that, but I'll talk about that when I talk about the Ravens and the Jets. So, where that was a very good win for the Giants, the LA Rams are kind of coming back to being the LA Rams. This I thought was very interesting, and I found this out. So, the LA Rams under Jeff Fisher are 12-26 as his tenure as the St. Louis/LA Rams coach against all other teams that aren't in the division or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is 18-12-1 against the division and Tampa Bay. He's 5-0 against Tampa, and he's 13-12-1 against the NFC West. So I thought that was really amazing. Where apparently, if he's not playing a division team with the Bucs, you pretty much can expect Jeff Fisher to lose the game. And with Todd Gurley, he's kind of having a down year. I don't think it's all his fault because the Rams really don't have any receiving threat or at all. Even though Kenny Britt had over 130 yards, which was the highest amount of receiving yards for a Rams wide receiver since week 8 of 2013. So kudos to Kenny Britt there. But Todd Gurley, who was third in the league in rushing in only 12 games last year, he's now at 17 for 346 yards. And the Rams have lost 6 straight against the Giants. And I just look at this game, and I'm going to use that stat I just used about Jeff Fisher. This is a game against the New York Giants. This is a game where the Giants have some confidence in them, and this might be the game where they can start getting on another roll. And I just don't really expect the Rams to do that much. Again, they can be competitive, and Case Keenum has played a lot better than I thought. He had 4 touchdowns and a pick yesterday, and he's played well enough to keep Jared Goff on the bench. Because honestly, with Jeff Fisher, I'd keep Keenum instead of Goff because I don't really like having Jeff Fisher work with rookie quarterbacks. Just look at Vince Young and McNair at first. And just kind of with how the Giants have more, talent on them, even though they suffered some injuries. I just like that New York's been over in London. It's a longer flight for the LA guys. That it's an extra 3-hour jet lag that you have to go over. And I just think, again, the Giants have a little bit more talent, and I trust Eli with this team than I do with the Rams. Even though both teams, the Rams can get pressure through that, Giants offensive line, and Keenum and Gurley can play decent enough to make it a game. I'll just take the Giants because I was more impressed with what the Giants did, and I thought maybe that could be a spark for them, where the Rams kind of showed where they're kind of on the other way. The Rams are kind of going into that spot of, okay, we are the Rams, and we're moving in the right direction that everybody thought we would. Should be a really good game. I'm interested to see these two teams. These two teams are kind of at a similar point. And I just think at the end of the day, Eli goes over Keenum, and the Giants defense, which has more talent on it, will trump the Rams. So that's what I'm thinking. New York over LA. Kansas City over New Orleans. Drew Brees, the 15 400-yard passing game in his career, breaking the NFL record for most 400-yard passing games for a career, so good for him. And also, he torched the Carolina Panthers defense just like Matt Ryan did, essentially. He is the second QB to throw for 450-plus yards on the Panthers defense in the last 3 games. A fun little fact here for Carolina fans, or just Carolina, through their first 339 games, so essentially through up until the last 3 weeks, they had no quarterback throw for 400 yards. But the one thing I see with New Orleans is that that defense still can't do anything. They've had 8 straight home games now, giving up 25 or more points. That is the longest streak in NFL history for home games. And the fact that they were up about 21-0 on the Panthers, and the Panthers were able to come back and make it a 38-38 game going into the final 2 minutes of the game, is a horrible concern. They let the Raiders score 35. They let Atlanta score 45. They let San Diego score 34, and they let Carolina score 38. Like, this is pathetic defense and horrible defense. It's just amazing where the offense has been able to kind of compensate, and San Diego, being San Diego, had 2 huge blunders that basically cost them the game. With Kobe Fleener, also I want to give him a little credit. He's the first tight end of a rushing and receiving touchdown in the same game since Gronk did it in 2011. And Brandon Cooks, the sensational deep threat for the New Orleans Saints, he became the first wide receiver with 2 85-plus yard touchdown receptions since Deshaun, with 2 of them in the same year, joining Deshaun Jackson and Mario Manningham, each who had 2 in 2010. They each had 2 85-plus yard touchdown receptions. So kudos to Brandon Cooks there. And they're playing a Kansas City team that now Andy Reid, after the bye, has the best record in NFL history. I should have thought about that before taking the Raiders. He's now 16-2 after the bye. And for Alex Smith, he played one of the better games in Chiefs history. He completed 86.2% of his passes. He went 19-22, so that is the highest completion percentage in Chiefs history, a minimum of 20 passing attempts. And Dontari Poe with the eat pig belly right play, which I believe they called that, got his second rushing touchdown of his career. And the Chiefs defense held the Raiders offense to the lowest point total of the year, which is incredibly impressive with how much points they have with how much the Raiders have scored this year. I'm going to take Kansas City here just because I trust Kansas City's defense. They held Houston to 19 points. They held Oakland to 10. They held the Jets to 3. Okay, and again, you can say, well, the Jets' offense doesn't have much. They got 6 picks off them. You know, Houston, 19 points. Houston's been erratic. But this Kansas City's defense has shown that they can play defense at a pretty good level. Where with New Orleans, besides the game against the Giants, which is an anomaly, every team that they have played, they've given up at least 30 points. They've given up 34 points or more in every other game. I think this Chiefs defense, even though, again, they have an offense that can score well, I don't think the Chiefs defense will let Drew Brees, especially in their place, give up 34 points. And just looking at Kansas City in general, I feel like they have more talent around. They have a better running game. And I just don't like Drew Brees going outside that dome, in all honesty. And the teams have split the last 6 games in this series. So, this could be a toss-up, and New Orleans might have a little bit of confidence. And I'm going to give New Orleans a bit of credit with that offense, because I think if you look at Kansas City's games, for the most part, they're within a touchdown. Most of them except yesterday's. Oh, well, no, rephrase it. Most of their, games, besides, kind of the blunders, have basically been around the score difference. So I'm going to take New Orleans credit, saying they can put up enough points to make it close. But I just don't see Kansas City. If they could put up 26 on the Raiders, they could easily put up 30 or 31 on the Saints, and the Saints could put up about 27 or 27. That's the kind of score I would see the game happening. And just with that, I have enough confidence to take the Chiefs on that sole reason alone. So that's why I'm taking Kansas City over New Orleans. Tennessee over Indianapolis. Andrew Luck has been sacked 23 times this year in the league. That's the most in the NFL. And also, here's a fun little stat, and then shout out to Poet Ryder. I found this out, so I thought this would be interesting, but I thought I'd let you know. And check out his videos. Since 1994, 402 teams have had a 14-point lead with 5 minutes left to go in the game. The Colts were only the 9th team to end up blowing that lead in the end. So for Indianapolis, yesterday that was a gut-punching loss, a gut-wrenching loss to the Houston Texans, because that should not have happened. Though I do want to congratulate Frank Gore for cracking the 100-yard mark on the ground for the Colts. He is the first Colt running back since Vic Ballard in 2012 to have 100 yards rushing. So finally, Andrew Luck had a compliment to his passing game, and Andrew Luck, pretty much besides the one interception, which was his 51st turnover since 2014, I believe that leads the league in the last 3 seasons. But Andrew Luck played a pretty much solid game, and it was just Indy's defense which let them down once again. And I think with Tennessee, with how they've been playing, the Titans have won back-to-back games for the first time since the 2013 season. It's their first 500 start through 6 games since 2011. The Titans have had 8 sacks in the last 2 games for the Titans. They've had 8 sacks in the last 2 games for Tennessee. And they're going up against the worst offensive line that's given up the most. So with that there, in that combination, and also I like how Mariota's been playing. He's been playing very efficient. Over the last couple weeks, he's had about 7 touchdowns and I think 1 interception over the last 2 weeks. He's getting all of his guys involved. Rashard Matthews, Delaney Walker, Kendall Wright had a big game yesterday. He actually had 133 yards receiving. That's the second most in his career. And I think the Titans have a balance at running and passing. I think Tennessee's defense can stuff the run a bit to have Andrew Luck more on his shoulders. And I just think Tennessee right now just is in a better spot. They have more talent and more depth in most positions. And I just think, again, they're angry. The Colts have the psychological advantage because they've won 14 of the last 15 games against the Titans. And Andrew Luck has never lost to the Titans in his career. He almost did in Week 3 last year, but Mariota threw a couple picks himself that changed the game there. But I'm going to take Tennessee here because they have more talent. They have more balance of a running game. I trust the Titans' defense to get after the Colts' offensive line. And I think Mariota and them are finding, confidence. And they're starting to be able to close games and play well enough to win this kind of game against a struggling Indy team that mentally is having its doubts or its frustrations that could boil over into this game. And also on that one play with Lamar Miller, that was just pathetic. There was about 7 Colts around him, and he got around every single one of them. If you have 7 guys trying to tackle one guy, you should not let him get through. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But that's why I'm taking the Tennessee Titans to beat the Indianapolis Colts. The Vikings over the Eagles. Minnesota, it's their first 5-0 start for the Vikings since 2009. They ended up going 6-0 to start that year, and they ended up going that year to the NFC title game. I think this Vikings team definitely has enough talent and enough potential to make that same game. And for Minnesota's defense, it's the best in the league by pretty much all accounts. Number 1 defense in points per game, number 1 defense in yards, number 1 defense in turnovers. And the offense, again, the offense isn't really that spectacular. They're about 21st in passing. They're dead last in rushing offense. But when you have that kind of defense causing that many turnovers and that many short fields, it's pretty easy to get points on the board for the most part. And for Sam Bradford, he's this is the best 4-game stretch of his career, and I believe he's taken Teddy Bridgewater's job permanently as the future starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. 70.4% completion percentage, 6 TDs, no interceptions for Mr. Sam Bradford. So, even though I'm not a big Sam Bradford fan, I have to admit this is the best football he's been playing his entire career. And when you look at the Eagles, Wendell Smallwood, congrats to him. It was the first kick return touchdown of the season when he returned to 84 yards for the score. But here was something interesting that I found out. But think about this. The Eagles, for the first time since Week 7 of the 2013 season, had no offensive touchdowns. Sturgis kicked 2 field goals, and you had the kick return by Smallwood and the pick 6 by Malcolm Jenkins that got him to 20 points. And honestly, for Carson Wentz, and I'm going to say this now, Dak Prescott has overtaken him. And I think Dak right now is showing that he is better than Carson Wentz at this point throughout the year. And you could say, well, Carson Wentz, he didn't really have that much of an offensive, they're missing their right tackle and they're playing with Big V. The Eagle fans I've heard call him, Big V. And he's only had 1 turnover. Dak Prescott, could have had 4 or 5 turnovers, even though he only has 3 so far, in his career. Hey, when you only complete 50% of your passes for 179 yards, he didn't do anything, horrible, but that's a subpar game compared to what Dak Prescott did yesterday, throwing for about 260, 3 CDs, and the 1 pick. And Dak Prescott's won 5 straight games, and he has a signature win. And Carson does too, I'll admit that. But Dak's just been on a better roll at this point, and he's showing that he's been more consistent. And Wentz is kind of hitting that wall now of, okay, what Carson Wentz are we going to see? Are we going to see the Carson Wentz that played the first 3 weeks, or is Carson Wentz going to kind of come back and say, okay, he's still, our quarterback, but he's not playing at a level where Dak is right now. But I digress. And also, I think one problem for the Eagles has been their penalties. The last 2 games, 27 penalties have been called on the Eagles for 225 yards. You can argue about the Lions game, which I understand, saying that there was a huge discrepancy there. Fair. But yesterday against the Redskins, that was pretty much an even called game. I think the Eagles had more penalties, but the Redskins had about 9 themselves. So it was pretty fair at that point or it was pretty even. They called plays for both sides. And the Eagles have lost 2 straight against Minnesota, and I just think with Sam Bradford coming back to town, knowing what Doug Peterson likes to do, and that's saying Doug Peterson and that team knows what Sam Bradford, they know what Sam Bradford is as a quarterback, but the problem is that Norv Turner, even though he's using some plays that Sam Bradford knew from Philadelphia and St. Louis, Norv Turner's offense is not Doug Peterson's offense, and I think that's going to be the biggest difference to where I think he'll be able to tell the defense how to exploit the Eagle offense, and I think the Vikings defense will have a great game against, this Eagles offensive line, which have been struggling. And I just think the Vikings, they're rested, and I just think, they're the better team in all phases of the game, and they're on a better roll. And I'll take that momentum over a struggling Eagles team that's on the brink of possibly, getting back into the cellar of the NFC East. So that's what I'm taking that's what I'm taking the Vikings to beat the Eagles. Next game, Cleveland at Cincinnati. Cleveland, their first 0-6 start since the franchise came back to Cleveland in '99. First 0-6 start. There's only been 2 bright sides for the Browns all year. Isaiah Crowell has been running the ball pretty effectively, and Terrell Pryor, has become a great number 1 receiver for this team. 33 receptions, 413 yards, and 3 touchdowns through the first 6 games. Highly impressive for a former quarterback from Ohio State. And then when you look at Cincinnati, it's their first 2-4 start since 2010, and they're going 4-12 that year. And I think the problem for Cincinnati is they've run into competition that they haven't been able to match. They miss guys like Sanu. They miss guys like Marvin Jones to help the offense. Tyler Eifert hasn't been there the entire year, which doesn't help. Jeremy Hill in 4 of the 6 games doesn't even have 40 yards rushing, and Giovanni Bernard hasn't even had 50 yards rushing in any of his games. Hill had 1 solid game, I think, against Denver. Giovanni Bernard had 1 solid game overall against Pittsburgh. Both of those games they ended up losing. But for Cincy, they've won 4 of the last 5 against Cleveland. And this Cleveland team at this point, they've just gone through so many injuries, and they've just had so much kind of bad luck or, bad management that I can't expect, Cleveland to win a game. I think Cleveland will win a game, but basically until they show that, their offense can be more effective or, they can close a game, I'm going to take the other team that Cleveland plays until they prove me wrong. And I think Cincinnati, they have clearly more talent. This is a game at home, and they've just been able to dominate the Browns, and I kind of expect the same thing, especially with the rookie quarterback and Kessler going to start for them. I really have no confidence in them, winning this game. However, it is a 10-point spread. I think Cleveland, they've shown over the year that they have fought in basically every game they played in, essentially except 2. And I think this game against Cincinnati, with kind of how this division game is, I can kind of expect a similar kind of game. So that's all. I'm going to take Cleveland plus 10, but Cincinnati straight up. The next game, the Redskins at the Lions. It's the best start for Washington since the 2007 season when they also went 4-2. I also want to congratulate the Redskins' rushing attack. They ran for 232 yards. A career high, 135 of them were from Matt Jones. That was the most amount of rushing yards they've had since the 2012 season at the end of the year when they beat the Dallas Cowboys to make the playoffs. Also, Kirk Cousins, 65% completion percentage, 1,002 yards, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Since he has started winning the last 4 games, he's starting to play like that franchise quarterback the Redskins have wanted. You know, again, he's on a roll, and he's pretty much put a lot of the doubters to bed of, you know, should we pay the guy or not? Again, I don't know if, you know, in the postseason it'll matter. But I think, again, if he wins a playoff game, he'll get that, you know, big-time contract. If he doesn't, there's still going to be some apprehension there. But right now, Kirk Cousins is playing like, you know, Kirk Cousins at his best. And I want to give him credit for that. I want to give the Redskins credit for that, for putting themselves right back in the NFC East race. And for Detroit, I want to congratulate Golden Tate for having 8 receptions, 165 yards, and a touchdown. Going into this game, he only had 134 receiving yards combined in the last 5 games. And I think one of the problems, though, for me is I don't know how this is going to go, but Detroit has really had a lot of running back struggles this year. Amir Abdullah's been on the IR. Theo Riddick has a hip injury. Justin Forsett really couldn't do anything, and Dwayne Washington really couldn't do anything. And I know they're going against one of the worst running defenses in the league. I think they're ranked 28th in Washington. But I just think of how the Lions have been, you know, just having problems running the ball. I don't think they have enough talent, or they're going to be healthy enough to run the ball effectively against the Redskins. Again, if they're able to, I think, you know, that definitely helps Detroit out a lot. But I just don't think they'll be able to run the ball effectively. I think Washington right now, Cousins is on a bit of a roll. They have a bit of a better defense than what the Lions have. And I just think it's something where the Redskins and Lions, the last time I think the Redskins went into Detroit, they lost in a pretty embarrassing way. That's some motivation for some of those guys that remember that game. And I think they're going to use that to say to the Lions, you know what, you're on a bit of a roll, but we are on a bigger roll, and we are more legitimate than you are in a game that has a lot of wild card implications on it, just to kind of how both these teams are situated. I think the game should be entertaining, but I'm going to take Washington here just because I look at Detroit and say, against this Washington team, I don't think they can match up enough to win the game. And also, Washington has a running game I've seen with the 3 guys in Robert Kelly, Chris Thompson, and Matt Jones. Detroit's running game basically for this year, going to the last few weeks, has been non-existent. And if Theo Riddick can't go, you're having Forsett and Washington out there again. I'll trust the Redskins defense to contain them enough so that the Redskins can win this game and win their 5th straight. So that's what I'm thinking. Washington over Detroit. Oakland over Jacksonville. Oakland scored its lowest points, like I said earlier, in the season with 10. Derek Carr, I do want to give a little credit. He's had 12 straight games of a passing touchdown, 3rd longest streak active in the NFL right now. But the Raiders' defense is still the huge problem. Spencer Ware ran for a career-high 131 yards against the Raiders' defense. This is the Raiders' worst defense in passing yards and 2nd worst in rushing yards. It's and they're playing a Jags team that's on a little bit of a roll. It's the best start for the Jags since 2010, and they've won back-to-back games, and in the last 19 road games, this is their 2nd victory yesterday against Chicago. I'm just going to take the Raiders here because I have... Oh, also, I want to congratulate Chris Ivory and Aurelius Ben. It was their first touchdowns each as Jaguars. Chris Ivory's first since joining the Jags from the Jets. Kind of amazing it took him about 7 weeks to get there. Even though he's had some health issues this year, which, you know, is a problem. And also for Aurelius Ben, his first touchdown catch since 2011. He's been out of the league going on about 4 seasons now. So good for him. And that touchdown catch won him the game, essentially. And also, when you look at this series, it's basically been about even. Oakland leads the series 4-3. And I think that... Jacksonville leads the series in the last 7 games 4-3 over the Raiders. I just think it's something where I think Oakland's team is also 3-0 on the road. I somehow just trust the Raiders more on the road to beat a Jacksonville team at home that's been struggling a lot. I think they've only won 3 games at home over the last 3 years. They've won 2 games in London over that span. So, with all that being said, even though if the Jaguars, you know, will be able to run the ball and pass over the Raiders' defense, I think this Raiders team will be able to put up enough offense on this Jaguars defense, which really hasn't been that effective for the most part, you know, all year, that I think the Raiders can outshoot the Jags in a high-scoring, entertaining game between 2 teams that kind of in where they are. They're kind of in decent spots to contend for their division, and more so Oakland because at least at 4-2, 4-2 is better than 2-3. So that's what I'm going to take Oakland plus 1.5, and Oakland straight up to beat Jacksonville. Buffalo at Miami. I want to congratulate Rex Ryan and Anthony Lynn, first of all, for being the assistant coach of the year over the last, on this 4-game winning streak, the first 4-game winning streak for the Bills since 2008. Anthony Lynn's offense has had 211 yards on the ground per game. That is amazing. LaShawn McCoy became the first Bills running back since Willis McGahee to have 3 rushing touchdowns in a single game. And the Bills scored their most points in a game since week 16 of the 2010 season, when they put up 49 against Cincinnati Bengals. Also, the Bills have 20 sacks already this year. Last year, their grand total of sacks was 21. So this Bills defense is playing a lot better. They're playing a lot more confident, and they have found their identity, and they are playing Rex Ryan type of football and running the ball incredibly effectively and using their defense to put the pressure on the quarterback. And that's how Rex Ryan and the Bills want to win games. Also, I want to give Shady credit for having a career high in touchdowns for himself with 3, tying a career high. And they're playing a Dolphins team that got a huge upset win, in my opinion, over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jay Ajayi, he's the first 200-yard rusher in the league this year, and he's the second running back for the Dolphins with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in a single game. The other one was Ricky Williams in 2002, and he's the first running back to run for 200 yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers since Week 12 of the 2000 season, when Fred Taylor of the Jags gashed him for 234 yards. Here's the best part about this for Ajayi. He only had 117 yards going into the game. So in one game, he went over his whole total for the entire year. And again, when you're running like that, when you're giving up that kind of plays, Pittsburgh kind of seemed like they just kind of held back and said, you know what, we're not feeling this game today. We're not very confident in it. Especially on that last run that sealed the game. I just think it was something where Miami and they got 2 big turnovers. I think Miami just kind of took Pittsburgh's will up there by the end of it. And also, Pittsburgh just kind of gave up on running, which was amazing. Le'Veon Bell only ended up with 10 carries for 53 yards. You would think that they would give Le'Veon more, carries, especially how kind of dynamic he is. But when I look at this game, Rex Ryan is 500 against Miami all time, as his tenure as both the Jets and the Bills head coach. They are 7-7, and the Bills have won 6 of the last 8 games against the Dolphins. And I just think, again, where Miami, they kind of got a fluke kind of victory, but I'm not really going to put that much stock into it because Ben went down for a little bit, and just Buffalo is just kind of on a better roll. And even though I think Miami could put up a fight, I think this Buffalo team just is going to be able to run the ball pretty effectively against this Dolphins team, and I think Tyrod's going to be able to make some plays with his legs and his feet, and make some plays to Justin Hunter, Robert Woods, Charles Clay, and put the Bills in a position to where they have so much confusion and so much power at the running attack. I don't expect the Dolphins to stop it. I think the Dolphins, again, it's a division game, and they have a good enough front seven to cause maybe the Bills some fits. But I think Buffalo just has too much of a dynamic offense, and they're playing too good defensively right now not to take them in a game against Miami, who feels a little happy about themselves, but aren't really as good as maybe, But let me phrase it, they aren't really good at all. And I just think this Bills team, they're showing that they are a for real team now, and they are in a position to definitely make the playoffs as a wild card, and they should be one of the leading wild card teams in the NFL, in my opinion, at this moment. So that's why I'm going to take Buffalo minus 2.5 and Buffalo straight up. Baltimore and the Jets. I told everybody last week on my video I was going to take the Giants because I had no confidence in the Ravens, and I was proven right. Again, where Baltimore's played in 20 games in the last 2 years have been one score. We are 4-16 in those games. And honestly, for the Ravens, it's just coaching decisions. We're taking field goals. We're taking chances when we don't have to. We're stopping running the ball at certain points. We're giving up, we're having gaps, on turnovers. And it's just a bunch of awkward coaching decisions, which, if 2 to 5 things don't happen, we could be 6-0 at this point. We could be 1-6. Who knows? I don't have any confidence in this team right now that, we're going to be able to, be able to hold on to anything. Amazingly, the entire division lost, so we're still in second place in the AFC North. And trust me, I would not be surprised if the Jets won this game. Because that's how much that's... But I'm going to take the Ravens here just because I kind of feel like for Jets fans, they've kind of just given in. And honestly, we've won 8 straight games against the Jets. And overall for the series, the Ravens are 8-1 against the Jets all time. So I'm just going to say, just with our talent and with what we've been able to do, with Eric Decker being out, with us having about one of the top defenses in the league, we allow the 8th fewest points, third fewest yards, and the 5th most turnovers forced this year. I think against a team especially led by Ryan Fitzpatrick, who at any moment can go from Ryan Fitzpatrick to Ryan Fitzhattrick of interceptions. I just have enough confidence to say that we can, squeak out a win over a lowly Jets team and get to a point where next week, amazingly, if my predictions come right, or in 2 weeks after the Ravens and Steelers have a bye, we can host the Steelers for the control in the AFC North. I never thought I would say that, especially with the way we've been playing over the last few weeks. But also, Pittsburgh's had a couple of stumbles too, which makes the game a lot more interesting. So that's when I'm going to take Baltimore to beat the Jets. Tampa Bay over San Francisco. San Francisco, their 5th straight game of 100-yard rusher. Kaepernick, for the most part, had a subpar game. Even though, for his sake, I was happy for him. He was able to get back out on the field. He went 13 of 29, 187 yards, a touchdown and no interceptions. But I'm going to take Tampa here because they just have a little more confidence in them. It was their first win against Carolina in the last 3 seasons. Their kicker, Aguayo, even though he missed 4 kicks... he missed 2 kicks. He was able to make the one that got the Bucks the win. And I just think with Tampa Bay, they should get Doug Martin back. Jacquizz Rodgers had 101 yards the last game against the Panthers, a career high for him. I think those 2 running backs can be a very effective duo, and I think Jacquizz Rodgers will have more of an opportunity because Charles Sims went down with a foot injury that knocks him out for the rest of the year. And also, I don't like San Francisco at home. They're kind of struggling at home, and this Tampa team, I think they're kind of I'll put it this way. Tampa Bay is Jacksonville this past week. They're coming off, their bye with a bit of confidence. And I think they're playing a team in San Francisco, kind of like with Chicago, where San Francisco at home, they play better at home than they do on the road, and they're going to give Tampa a fight. But I think Tampa just has a little bit more talent and just a little bit more momentum and confidence than the Niners do, that the Bucs will be able to find a way to win this game. That's going to take Tampa Bay -2 and Tampa Bay straight up. Next game, San Diego at Atlanta. San Diego, for the first time all year, led the entire game and won the game, so good for them. And also Phillip Rivers, I do want to congratulate him. He surpassed Dan Fouts for the most passing yards in Chargers franchise history. And also they had a 10-game losing streak against the AFC West snapped. And they snapped Denver's 15-game road win division streak as well. So kudos to San Diego there. But they are playing an Atlanta team that, even in defeat, have shown that they are a different Atlanta team than last year, and they are a legitimate threat to the NFC. Because what a spectacular game by Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan threw 3 passing touchdowns in the third quarter against Seattle. Seattle's defense up to that point had only given up 1 passing touchdown to anybody the entire year. And I am a believer in Atlanta, and I'm just looking at San Diego saying, okay, you're not playing Trevor Siemian in this Broncos offense. I think Phillip Rivers, he can put up points against this Atlanta defense because it is shown that, especially with kind of a guy like Rivers, that it can get exposed and it can get thrown on. But I think Atlanta's offense just has too much firepower, and their defense is kind of getting more motivated, and they're playing better each week. And I think Atlanta's defense can hold enough for Atlanta's defense can hold enough so to where their offense can overcompensate and get a shootout win over a San Diego team that's going out to the East Coast. That's always a struggle. And they're 1-8 all time against the Falcons in general. And of all that being said, that's why I have no confidence to say, after 2 very tough but respectable road games against the Broncos and the Seahawks to go 1-1, and essentially, they could be 2-0. And about the PI that happened yesterday, I don't really, feel that. Well, I'll put it this way: that pass interference should have been called. I don't think Richard Sherman needed to pull Julio's arm down, because I don't think Julio would have caught the ball anyway. That should have been called. But also, I do want to give Matt Ryan a little bit of blame for not running on it on third down. If he did that, the fourth down would have been a lot more manageable. I do think the Falcons should have had the ball at about midfield because that was a blatant pass interference call. But I don't think that either Sherman would have needed to grab Julio's arm like that. And also, I think Matt Ryan deserves a little blame because he had an opportunity, or he should have made the run to make it a 4-1, or just run for it on first down anyway to move the chains that way. Should be an entertaining offensive game. San Diego's probably the best 2-4 team in the league. Atlanta always seems, to play very well against anybody in any spot. They're happy to be back home, to have a lot of national respect. And I just think, for the first time all year, I'm going to take the Falcons to win because they've shown enough for me to say they're going to, play a bit better than what the San Diego Chargers have done. Even though, again, I'll give San Diego their credit. They've been in every one of their games. I just think the 6.5 point spread is too big. So that's what I think. San Diego plus 6.5, but Atlanta straight up. New England over Pittsburgh. No Big Ben. No Big Ben. That's all I needed to hear. They are playing a Patriot team that is clearly the best team in the AFC. You could argue the best team in the NFL in general. I think Minnesota is better than them right now, just of how they've been playing. And I think Minnesota, they have a formula and a team that can give, Tom Brady and the Patriots a run for their money. But when you have, Tom Brady having his 8th career game of at least 375 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Drew Brees is the only guy in NFL history with more such games with 12. The Patriots are the 3rd team in NFL history with no interceptions thrown in the first 6 games, joining the 2008 Redskins and the 1960 Cleveland Browns. Tom Brady is now 98-15 at home since he became the starter of New England. That's the best record since 1960 with a minimum of 50 starts. He's now 41-9 at home all time against the AFC, or 49-1 at home against the AFC since 2007. And overall, since 2007, he is now 61-5 at home. That is just unreal. And I want to congratulate Tom Brady for being the 4th player with 5,000 completions. Only Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, and Brett Favre have more completions. And I'm just looking at this game. I think Pittsburgh, Antonio Brown has 43 touchdowns of Big Ben Roethlisberger. Anytime nobody else plays, no other quarterback can throw Antonio Brown a touchdown. That is a huge factor for this game because I think if they can't score touchdowns, if Antonio Brown's not scoring touchdowns, you are not going to win most games against a New England type of team. And also, they kind of gave up on the running game at some point in the game. Big Ben had a stretch when he came back into the game of 19 straight passes. If they abandon the running game, they're not going to beat a New England team that's playing this good. And I just think with Landry Jones being there, I just don't think that Landry Jones in that kind of spot, going against that New England team, that kind of knows cold weather, that knows Pittsburgh pretty well. Brady's 4-2 at Pittsburgh all time, even though he lost the last game he went there, which was, I think, October 25th, 2011. I just think New England, with Big Ben being down at least this week, just basically gives the Patriots the win. With all that being said, with added. I think if the Steelers, they've needed to get their butts kicked pretty well to have motivation. But I think even all the motivation in the world with Landry Jones, I don't think that Landry Jones will be able to beat this Patriot team with what we've seen on Landry Jones, who's basically a spot starter that can make 1 or 2 throws a game. That if they're lucky, if they get caught 10 yards in, he can win you games. He can win you a game or 2, but not against this New England team. So that's why I'm taking New England to beat Pittsburgh. Next game, Seattle at Arizona. Russell Wilson, his 20th fourth quarter or game-winning drive for the Seahawks that breaks the franchise record held by Dave Craig. So kudos to Seattle there. It was Seattle's first win by trailing by 7+ points in the fourth quarter since 2013, and they've won 25 straight. They've won 25 straight wins at home with a 14-point lead at any point in the game. The last time they lost a game with that big of a lead, and they blew it, was in 2004 against the Rams. Seattle was 4-1 against Arizona in Arizona, under Russell Wilson. They are the number 3 defense in points allowed and the number 1 defense in total yards allowed. And I just saw a stat about Bruce Arians. He doesn't lose in primetime TV that often. He's playing tonight in primetime. He's going to play in primetime this Sunday night. I think he's like 7-1 primetime. But one of those, I think the one loss in primetime came against this Seattle team. So this Seattle team knows how to play them in primetime. I think Arizona, they're gonna have motivation because they know that there's division hopes right on this game. Because I think if they lose this game against Seattle, there's no way they're gonna win that division. And I think if Arizona, at 4-3, if they win the next 2 games, they're right back in this race and they're right back in kind of playoff contention. But just about Seattle's been playing, they've been playing more consistent. Russell Wilson's been playing, much more effectively, even through his MCL sprain. He made, Russell Wilson type plays that won them the game against Atlanta. And I trust Seattle in this spot more than Arizona because Seattle's been more consistent in Arizona, and that's kind of the difference for me. Where Arizona at home, they laid an egg against the Rams, they laid an egg against the Patriots. I think the Seattle team, just of how they've been kind of rolling, they have more talent, more momentum, and I just trust them in Arizona more often than I do Seattle because I think they've won more games in that fashion. They've won more games in Arizona than Arizona has in Seattle. So, that's why I'm going to take Seattle +1 and straight up. And then finally, the Texans at Broncos. Lamar Miller, 168 yards from scrimmage, third most in his career in a single game. It's the Texans are the first team since the 2011 Broncos, ironically, to overcome a 14-point deficit with 3 minutes left. Since Osweiler got his starts back in Week 11 of last year, when trailing by 14 or more points in the fourth quarter, Osweiler is 500 and 2-2. The rest of the league is 1-96. Denver Broncos, like I said earlier, had a 15-game road division streak snapped, and they were held under 20 points in back-to-back games for the first time since D. Tebow led Broncos. Houston is now 2-5 in primetime TV. I'm going to take Denver here just because I think Denver's defense is not Indy's defense, and I think that Trevor Siemian, with that being said, Brock Osweiler against top defense this year has been absolutely abysmal. He's only put up about 12 points. I think with Denver's offense going against Houston's defense, I think Houston's defense can get pressure on Siemian, but with them having extra days rest, it's a game at their place. It's the motivation of they're playing their former quarterback. I think Trevor Siemian, with knowing that Brock's going up against a much tougher defense, he's going to play more like he did the last 2 times with Minnesota and New England, and I think that will allow the Broncos to be able to run the ball a little bit better or score enough points that their defense can hold on to win the game. I think, again, it's going to be a close game because both offenses right now really aren't that clicking against these kind of defenses. And also Denver's just kind of in a funk themselves. But I think Denver has just enough defensive firepower, especially against this kind of quarterback, one they know very well, to win the game and to put themselves in first place, or tied for first place in the AFC West, going into the game next week when the Broncos... Oh, I'm sorry, or is that the week after? Oh, it's week 9 when the Broncos play the Raiders. Sorry about that. So those are my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, subscribe. Please tell me, guys, what you think about my picks. What ones you like, what ones you disagree with. Any thoughts on anything NFL related. Shout out to guys like Andrew Warren again. Team Avatar 112. Billy B. Hatbox, Bridgewater's Finest. Mason Cole. The Beast. Philadelphia, Football Chick. 794, Poet Rider, and all the other great NFL YouTube prognosticators out there. And until next week, good luck to all players, coaches, teams, fantasy players, and fellow prognosticators. And until next week, this is Matt the NFL Fanatic signing off. Until then, so long.